According to intel briefings, Russian authorities have, quote, specific, unverified, and potentially unverifiable, unquote, allegations of contact between Trump aides and Russian operatives, including graphic claims of sexual acts documented by the Russians. According to these documents that no one can verify, the president-elect would reserve the presidential suite of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where he knew President and Mrs. Obama, whom he hated, according to the documents, had stayed on one of their official trips to Russia and defiling the bed where they had slept by employing a number of prostitutes to perform, quote, golden showers in front of him. Well, I don't know about you, but I, for one, am now really glad that I did not read Trump's 2004 book, The Midas Touch. The Trump Report starts now.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Oh! Well, that's just inappropriate, isn't it? Don't give me a story like that mere hours before the Trump Report and expect to not run with it. Welcome to the Trump Report. I'm Christian Bladt on Twitter at ChristianDMZ. And to my left, camera right, for those of you watching on YouTube, where you should join us in the chat room. Tell us what you're thinking. Scott Moore at S-Man80. Hey. Next to him, the lovely and talented Chelsea Galicia. And next to her, at Chelsea Galicia. Next to her, the almost as lovely, slightly less talented, at Stephen Helmkamp. And we are very honored, nay, humbled to be joined by the one and only Drexel Hurd, at Drexel Hurd. Yes, it's a family reunion of Trump versus Hillary.
We're just not peeing on each other.
Yet.
Exactly.
Yet. I think Neil put some plastic down in case it goes that route. But let's try and keep it all above the waist. And please, the show's Twitter is at Trump Report ABTV. Follow us there, like us on YouTube, comment, rate on iTunes. All that stuff helps. And Drexel, we're honored, as I said, to have you with us. You needed a little. Not a little detox from politics for a while, but the show...
it wasn't very long though.
No, it wasn't very long because talk a little bit about what happened over the weekend and about you and your personal life and public life as well.
Public life.
Yeah.
So I did take a little break. I have not watched the news really since Election Day, and
good for you.
I must
feel great.
It felt great, and I love my MSNBC. I love my CNN, and occasionally I'll flip over to Fox
O'Reilly factor once in a while.
If I feel challenged.
Truth? I was like, if you want to joke,
if I want to joke and I want to laugh,
if you want some truth, some down the middle.
If he wants to visit the no spin zone,
if I want to see all of their anchors leaving their network, but actually, right after Election Day was right around the time that California citizens were able to go out and apply, not necessarily apply for, but just declare that they were running for a district delegate in the districts for the California Democratic Party. So that was what I was doing at that time. We were running, we were talking to people, going to lots of different events and talking to different Democrats across our district and around Los Angeles. And the election was this weekend. So every district gets 14 delegates, 7 males, 7 females. Really great turnout from what I heard across Los Angeles. A lot of energy from the progressive wing of our party, which is great.
Yeah.
I was elected as one of the 7 delegates for my district with the third highest votes of the group. So it's a thank you. It's a really great opportunity. Chelsea was actually I spoke to Chelsea early on in it when we were coming up with the language that I would write in terms of my declaration, because you have to write a little blurb or whatever. And I think for me it's just this entire process from the Democratic primary last year through the election. I think at this point, Democrats have work to do. But I think it is, and I said this in my speech, which was, and I firmly believe that this is no longer the party of Barack Obama after tonight. Hillary Clinton. This is no longer the party of Bernie Sanders. This is the Democratic Party. And at some point, we have to recognize that our party is not about the person. It's about the ideas. And we elect ideas versus people. And I think that's what we got caught up with Hillary Clinton. A lot of my friends got caught up with Hillary Clinton. I know they love her. I know they love Bernie Sanders. I know they love their people. But I didn't vote for Barack Obama because I liked Barack Obama. I voted for Barack Obama because I believed in him as a presidential candidate. I voted for Hillary Clinton because I believed her as a presidential candidate. Even if Bernie Sanders had been the Democratic nominee, I would have voted for Bernie Sanders because I believe in the ideas that they are putting forth and stuff like that. So I think that people have to start getting away from that and stop labeling themselves. I saw an article this weekend in Huffington Post. I'm sure it was written by what they like to call an establishment Democrat. But it said, welcome to the party Bernie-crats across California. And I said, that's not, for me, I don't like the term Bernie-crat because they're still Democrats. At the end of the day, you're not welcome. You're just saying, hey, you're now part of this conversation that you might have felt like you weren't before. And I don't particularly care for the term Bernie-crat.
I love it.
Bernie.
Well, listen, I don't think Bernie Sanders. If Bernie Sanders was a Democrat, then he's welcome to create his own party, which I would have hoped he had done.
We might do.
So does that
Which
mean
is
there's
totally-
a Trumpican
which is totally fine.
then?
Which is totally fine. But like I said, at the end of the day, I think a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters are going to be disappointed. I know we're talking about it. I know a lot of progressives are very resistant from Donald Trump, but it seems like Senator Sanders might be a little bit more forthcoming about wanting to work with him.
Call him a pathological liar.
I mean, since it came up, Chelsea, your thoughts about your pal Bernie, your guy, speaking out, and
Specifically last night, the town hall meeting?
Yeah.
I guess that's where it was.
I don't think it was the town hall. I think he had said that right after the election, and then.
Well, and he sort of
It's been-
reiterated
yeah,
it, and I
reiterated
guess it
it
was
last
at the town hall.
Well, I thought the town hall was brilliant. It was excellent. The questions were great that he was asked. His answers were good. There was one part where I was like, he could have done that better, where the small business owner stood up to complain about all the regulations, and Bernie started to argue with him, made some valid points, but the point that he left out that I thought he should have made was that a lot of these regulations have been pushed for by big businesses in order to keep the little guy out.
Right.
So if you know that that's true, then you wouldn't be voting for the same people that like the Walmarts of the world are voting in. So I wish he could have capitalized on that opportunity to say, this party is going to be the party of the people. He tried to say that over and over, but it will remain to be seen if Democrats really do adopt an agenda that is. You're going to kill me. The term that came to mind was drain the swamp, but what is an anti-corruption?
The idea. It's the same idea in that sense.
And I wish. I mean, it was quick. It was like all of an hour. I wish that everybody would watch it. And
Are you going to go home and watch it again tonight?
I might.
Before bed?
I might. It was really good. I really want to absorb it like into my cells. Most of the answers, I was going to guess what he said before he said it. There were a couple of times that I didn't. One of the answers that I really liked he gave, somebody asked, how do we address income inequality without demonizing the 1%? And he's like, I'm not demonizing them. I'm telling you the facts about how much wealth is going to them and then what they're doing to accrue even more. So I haven't used the word demonize. You all are using that word. But in my mind, I'm like, sometimes there are people doing bad things that need to be, if you want to say, demonized. And to say that somebody like me who's concerned about income inequality demonizes rich people doesn't know me, because I come from...
Because she's rich, y'all.
And so I watched my parents make all the money that they have now, and so I do not have a problem with people making a ton of money. I have a problem with people making it by breaking the law, being unethical, destroying the environment, caring very little about the employees, about all the stakeholders rather than just the shareholders. So,
and that's the highlight of Clinton Cash, folks.
Well, was that the point you were going to make? Was that you'll watch?
I will watch the Bernie town hall, which I want to watch anyways, if the panel Truly watches Clinton
I
Cash,
watched Clinton
which you
Cash.
just
I watched
gave
it
which
too.
you
I
just
watched
gave a
it.
summary of.
I couldn't get through it all.
Do you
It
have
was
back-end
awful. It was so
points on Clinton
horrible.
Cash? At this point, you're
So
just
fake.
trying to pump up the sales.
No,
a
but
little
I
bit.
think he's.
Yeah,
I think he
yeah.
brought it up because
Yeah.
I'm sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
But here's the
That's
thing.
ridiculous.
I watched.
The audience didn't know what it was. I saw in the comments they had no idea what it was or where to
How
find it.
could
So
you not-
it's on YouTube. Clinton Cash. It's a documentary
Oh
on
my
YouTube.
God,
God.
we
Oh,
have
it's
really.
ridiculous.
Here's one thing about
Shells?
it. It's free. You don't have to
It
pay
is
to
free,
watch
But
it,
that's why
so-
it's free, because it's horrible. It's so terrible. I couldn't even watch it all.
Drexel was
False.
trying to make
Go
me
check
laugh.
it
I
out.
was just. I was just gonna say, like, it goes
Terrible.
back to a lot of what Chelsea talks about. Obviously Democrats are about to go through something, a new election in terms of the party in the next month. In February, we elect our next DNC chair. There's a lot of great people
Keith
running.
Ellison,
Yeah.
go Keith Ellison.
There's a lot of great people running. I know Mayor Buttigieg from Pete Buttigieg.
Can we get
Yeah,
the chat
from-
up, by the way,
from
please?
Wisconsin,
From Indiana,
from Indiana, I know
Yeah.
has declared his candidacy. I know, for me personally, I welcome all three of our top candidates.
Oh, come on. Tell them what you really think.
I do. I have no problem with Keith Ellison. I have no problem with Tom Perez.
I thought you were excited about Keith Ellison.
I am excited about Keith Ellison,
But
but
you have
I'm
no
equally
problem with
but I have no problem with all three of these candidates. I think that at some point, the problem with the Democratic Party, and I've said this from the beginning, I said that I was looking at my time hop, and I said this 2 or 3 years ago about Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and I remember saying that Democrats have a messaging problem. It's not necessarily a policy problem. A lot of the stuff that Chelsea brings up
and a prioritizing
and a
problem.
priority problem. It's not that we don't have the ideas.
And a turnout problem, too.
And a turnout
That is
a
another
majority
issue,
of
turnout.
Americans believe in the policies that the Democratic Party puts forth in terms of how we do it. Now, whether or not you're big business, I talk to small business owners all the time who believe that regulations, yes, are killing their business. I get it. Fine. But at the end of the day, when it comes, we have a moral, and Barack Obama talked about it in a few speeches early on, where he talked about we have a moral problem. And at the end of the day, the Democrats have to push that message back out to people by saying we have to get back to the roots of the problem.
Are you talking about what
And
Bernie calls out as corporate greed? That was one of the things
I'm not
that
talking
he,
about, no, I'm talking, no, because you're talking economics. I'm talking not only
in
economics.
this country, it all starts with economics.
Yes, but and Chelsea, we disagree on. We have very different opinions on that. However, what I'm saying is that I'm looking at the whole thing, and by saying Democrats have to be able to talk about social issues in a way that we talk about it from a moral standpoint, and we have to talk about economic issues as it talks from a moral standpoint.
I object.
And that's fine, But at the end of the day, Democrats have to do better on messaging, and we have to be able to push that back out. And I think that Keith Ellison is a great messenger. I think that Tom Perez is a great messenger. I think that Mayor Pete, who is brand new, could be a good messenger. I think he might be a great vice chair at some point, but I think Adam Panchenko is going to end up being DNC vice chair.
But I was going to say
Guys,
something about kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, and it does go back to the messaging, but does not also go back to the personality. Like you were saying, like we're a party of ideas. Also, that takes a person like a Barack Obama or someone to come out to be able to get that message and get people to turn out and vote. And that's part of the thing that happened with Trump, who, if it was a different Republican, probably would not have won that upper Midwest states this past fall. So it does take a person that can also be the vessel to bring that message.
Well, I think, and I think that if you look at
he wouldn't have won the
if you look
no,
at the
it's
top,
not have won the upper Midwest.
Right.
No, the states that flipped.
it's
no.
hard to say because
I mean, that's hard to say.
No.
who
I don't-
is
It's hard
that
to say,
other-
but I'm
who is
saying-
that other Republican.
I'm saying
There's
as
a
far
lot
as-
who would have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but likely
Yeah.
they would not have if it was a different Republican because of the fact that he drew a very specific demographic.
I think if it was a different Republican, that Republican would have won by a landslide.
No.
I don't think so either.
Don't think so.
I don't think
again,
so either.
So many
depends on
people
who it is.
It depends.
begrudgingly
I
went
think
in
it's
and
a-
voted for Donald
Not
Here's
at
Trump.
all, because the upper Midwest was ripe for changing,
John
but it still
Kasich would have
wasn't.
won by a landslide.
No.
I don't know about that. Here's what I'll say, and to your point, which is, if we go back to Keith Ellison, and early on, I told Chelsea, I said, yeah, I'm a big fan of Keith Ellison. If we're talking about personality and message,
Right, and, like, getting
Keith
the
Ellison
message out.
Keith Ellison
Yeah.
is the guy to do that. It's just like if Cory Booker wanted to be DNC chair, Cory Booker would be this great orator for Democrats in terms of messaging. I think that you do have to have someone young and energetic.
Right.
Tom Perez is a little Obama-esque. He's a little bit in his head. He kind of wants to say the right things, which is fine for a managerial.
work for
It's
us
fine
anymore.
for managerial purposes of the DNC, but you do have to have effective messengers to be able to go out. And I know from Keith Ellison's platform, and I know from Tom Perez's platform, they both are really trying to get us away from what Bernie talked about. I think he mentioned his town hall, but I know he's talked about it before, which is getting us away from focusing on the presidential and getting us back into battleground, and not just battleground states, but local states and working our way back up. So,
tell me your
That's
objection.
the important thing.
My objection was that to say that I'm only concerned about the economy is not true. When we clean up the corruption, then we can address the social issues like private prisons, the drug war. All of these have roots of money and politics. Who doesn't want to end the drug war? The people that make a lot of money selling their drugs. Who doesn't want to end private prisons? The people making money. So these are social issues that are affected by the money and politics. And I say money and politics, and it sounds like that's an economic issue, but it's the issue of all issues.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to be the first one to admit it that I don't want to do anything to reform the prisons because I put a large six-figure sum in orange jumpsuit futures, and I'm doing well so far. Now, Drexel, you mentioned the term Obama-esque, and you talked about Obama speaking, and that's one of the big things that happened tonight. In fact, the original title of this episode and the original song was going to be My Way because much like the chairman of the board, I like to think that President Obama did things his way. Now, Drexel, you were traveling, so did you get to hear much or any of President Obama's speech?
I didn't. I read it as right before we were going on there. I had
You were reading some of what it was.
But everybody that messaged me said, I can't wait for you to watch this speech, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it, and make sure you get your tissues.
My thought on it was leave it to President Obama to figure out a way to deliver one more State of the Union address, because it was very much what it was. But I understand that a few people here on the panel also saw it. Scott, what were your thoughts about
I listened to it.
It's almost as good.
So you missed the part where he wiped a tear?
No, I know. I missed that part. I was listening to it.
Oh, that was a highlight.
But it was beautiful. And the thing about the president is that he's so good about kind of being above the fray and doing these great soaring speeches. I mean, there's no doubt if that's one thing that we can agree on bipartisan is that he's a great.
He's got a nice
great
draw
speech.
to him. Yeah.
Great cadence, great way of connecting.
Yeah.
And staying positive because he could have gone really, really negative, and he kept it positive and kind of just said, "Hey, I'm still going to be there."
People booed about the transfer of powers, like, "Hey,
someone was protesting too, I think, in the beginning, like right when you started, and then they
just
started
yelling obnoxiously.
Yeah.
They were over chanting 4 more years. But what? I couldn't make it out what the protester was saying.
No,
I did not actually hear what they said. Yeah,
I couldn't tell either.
No, I couldn't either.
But I don't know. I mean, for me, look, it's a great opportunity. You got the feeling that this was actually a really hard speech for him because now it's real. Like, this is it.
I wish that he was going to all right, let's loosen the tie, roll up our sleeves, and let me tell you exactly what went wrong here and what we got to do now.
I know, but you knew he wasn't going to do that.
I don't think that's the point
because
of it.
otherwise
No,
he
you wanna
just
be
he
positive
said
He can do that the next time he addresses.
I think that's January 21st.
Yeah, when he's not president.
When he's ready to let loose and do his thing.
But it's funny that
this was the stage for it, I think.
He referenced
No,
George
not
Washington's farewell address.
He did.
Right.
And what I know from George Washington's farewell address is that Washington warned us against political parties.
Yeah.
And so it's not unheard of that somebody makes bold statements in their farewell address.
Well, and Eisenhower made the bold statement the night before he left about the military-industrial complex, kind of going back to.
So I was
what you're
waiting for
saying.
something like bold and actionable and practical, and I wanted to hear his opinion on should we be as obstructionist as the Republicans were the last 8 years. Like, I wanted him to address that specifically. I wanted to get a lot of things done. I couldn't. Some of that was due to straight obstructionists. Somebody said their only mission is to make sure I'm a one-term president, and then after that, to block any efforts at my success. And I think going forward, we should pay it back, or we should be better than that.
I know that's what he's thinking, but I don't know if that would come across.
But I also don't think to that point. I also don't think the Democrats have made their decision on what they want to do either.
But
so
he could have advised them.
I'm sure he is behind the scenes, but I also think that from what I read and from what I've heard so far is that the president started his campaign out in Chicago, 8 years ago, talking about hope, and he ended his 8 years as president talking about hope. To go negative would not have been.
I'm not asking negative. I'm asking practical.
But that's not. But to me, as an Obama fan, that is the capsule of hope, and saying we're going to get to work, we're going to do it together. after this is all over, because that is what we do. This is what a democracy is all about.
He's very clearly interested in his legacy, and yes, having those bookends, having it be in Chicago as well.
And that's his style.
There'll be time after he's president for all
I
that
agree
stuff.
with Chelsea on that.
I
Chelsea
definitely
wants
agree with
facts,
your points.
Solutions,
point
not
for it.
feel-good speeches.
Yeah, but that's not his.
That's not his
That's not his style. And again, he's wrapping up his presidency, and he wants to keep it a high note. I thought he did a good job, though, doing a little bit of jabs about democracy in part of that speech, and he was talking about it sort of about. Which to me was a little bit of a jab to Trump and the Republicans, sort of just talking about, keeping democracy strong, and
actually,
we're the ones giving the power. And
he made a comment about bullying smaller neighbors, and I think that the term bully is probably a reference to Trump, which actually reminded me of the Meryl Streep Golden Globe acceptance speech for her award, and a video that I saw that spoke out against the speech that Meryl Streep gave, which said, this is kind of hypocritical because you want to say that Trump is a bully, but really right now we are bombing 7 countries, and that's under Obama's, administration. So to say that he's the only bully, I mean, I didn't totally get the parallel, but I got it. So we're bullying smaller, I mean, not necessarily neighbors because they're mostly Middle East, that we're right now actively bombing 7 countries that we are not at declared war with. So I am starting to see some of the hypocrisy in the label of...
I felt like the only thing Meryl wanted to say that she didn't say was calling a lot of people deplorables. Like
well,
the people who
that's
watch
interesting
football
because the
and
point,
MMA, we're all deplorables.
That was actually the point that Piers Morgan made. I saw this a little bit before. He said that I haven't heard such elitist snobbery since Hillary Clinton branded Trump supporters a basket of deplorables. Now, obviously, I'm of the frame of mind that if Meryl Streep wants to get up there and say whatever she does, that's great. She has that platform.
Yeah.
She's entitled to it. And everyone who's reacted poorly to it, well, not even reacted poorly, but they were disappointed with their comments and disagreed. Also welcome to say it. So it's it's not like, oh, what she said was brave and screw you for saying
The
it.
dumb comments are like, actors should just stay acting.
Well, no,
like,
I was like, hi,
you're a shoe salesman. You're only allowed to talk about shoes.
But
your
also,
whole
Trump
life.
was a celebrity, and he's the biggest elitist there is. So it's like very hypocritical to talk about that when he's a billionaire.
She can say whatever she wants to say. Right, she has a platform.
It's a joke.
For her to just not get the people who voted for Trump are the people who are just turned off by that sort of a rhetoric.
That's not what she said.
No.
Yes, and that's the way it was taken.
How could it
because
be taken?
if we don't watch her, or if she's not there to make movies, then we have nothing to watch. But like, if we're not there to watch your movies, you have nothing to make. And for her to say, violence creates violence.
It's true.
So a lot of
It is
people,
true, but we are being very violent.
But a lot of people are thinking, like Trump voters are saying, well, how about when the DNC paid people to go and cite violence at the Trump rallies?
I don't know that that's a thing.
I don't know that.
I
don't know
that
that
is a thing.
No,
and she
it's
talks
not a
about
thing.
Hold on a second.
the honor
Wait,
of
time
truth.
out.
Hold on. She talks about the
Not a
honor of
thing.
truth. But what I'm saying is she's missing the connection with 60 million people who voted against Hillary Clinton.
Can we have a
Which is
discussion?
less
Hold on a
people than
minute.
the majority that voted for her.
That's kind of besides the
I
point.
just have to say,
I'm saying,
I really missed having all of us together again. This is what I missed out on
who
Thanksgiving.
so resists answering my questions because you're like, oh, that's speculation. You sure do like to cite a lot of
when you
speculation.
speculation of things that aren't
That's
true
nothing
necessarily. It's been
speculative
proven. Yes,
about
it
it.
is
I'm just
speculative.
saying, what she addressed, I just felt like
Again,
she
it's cherry
really
picking what you want to think is
Right.
speculative.
Here's the thing.
into
I just want
portion
to.
of Americans,
But that's not. But here's the thing.
and that's what we're seeing on the internet.
The
We're seeing
problem,
reactions.
the problem with a lot of folks and that have that mentality that Steve brought up, miss the general point of it. And I think Meryl Streep, and by think I mean I know that's what I took away from it, was saying, look, we don't want you to be violent people. Look, what happens in political campaigns? We talk about that. You brought up the DNC. I was watching the West Wing is my favorite show on television. I talk about it all the time. What happened in that instance happened in an episode of the West Wing a long time ago. This is nothing. The way that campaigns are run, the underhanded tricks that happen that are outside of the campaign, whoever's personal campaign, that shit happens. It happens on both sides.
Oh, yeah,
this
all
is
the
nothing
time.
new.
I know, that's not
so
new.
to say, oh, it was a DNC thing.
Right.
The RNC has been doing this stuff 4 years. The DNC has been doing this stuff for years.
Meryl's
That is
trying to almost put a guilt trip on anyone who doesn't like Hillary Clinton.
She was not.
And went the other way.
Did she talk about those voters?
Because
she didn't talk about the voters. She talked about him and his behavior.
That may not have been her intention,
and his
but
behavior.
Did she? Hold on, wait. Did she? No. Did she talk about the voters?
She did not.
Bro.
Did she bring up the voters?
Look at the
No.
internet.
That wasn't the question. But that was not the question. The question was.
We can't help it if people are.
Did she bring up? She said
poor interpreters.
she used in her speech. She used an example of when Trump mocked the reporter. Now, Trump likes to pretend like it didn't happen.
mocking the reporter.
Mocking the reporter. She used that as a clear example of a bully. Now, that was not on the voters. That was on the person who did the bullying of the reporter.
Correct.
So,
and she
at
also
no point,
insinuated to violence. I'm thinking
she said violence?
that his rallies were so violent and people were beat up.
She's not even
now
talking
we've
about
seen
the
that.
rallies.
I don't think she's talking about the rallies. I think she's talking about,
about,
in general, violent talk begets
Right.
violent talk.
And she's saying the behavior that people see
And,
from
that can go.
him.
But that can go for either
violence,
side.
though.
What's she going to get up there and
Right.
say?
Right.
She didn't talk about a specific people. She said to the people in the audience.
I think what's
This is what-
frustrating is that there's no. Yes, that may be true, Meryl. But how about the other side too?
What was she gonna
Because
say?
the other side wasn't talked about as well. So I think that's where people get so
So
frustrated.
are you saying that? Are you
It's
saying that?
saying that-
Would you
Okay.
have?
What
Would
is
you
the
have
other
talked?
So you're like
Yes,
Donald
would
Trump, and
you-
Donald Trump should
there
go
was
up there and
rough
have his
rhetoric.
15 minutes to
yes,
talk
there was
now?
rough rhetoric for sure, and
Rough.
we may have a wild card
Oh
in
my
office. Okay, but how about the other stuff? How
Would
about
you-
the
would
DNC?
you- would-
What's
would-
the other?
How about the emails? How about the
Oh my God!
Now we're
The
acid
emails.
wash
Oh,
and
give me a freaking
hammers coming
break.
down and breaking on the iPhones.
Oh my
that
God.
stuff bothers people,
What?
and that the
No.
fact that
When
the Hollywood
Steven's not
elitists
here next time,
Yeah.
I'm just
don't
going to say
acknowledge
emails,
that.
Yes,
and then people are
emails,
going to
and-
think he's
Well,
right
no,
here.
that's
Yeah.
what bothers people.
No. What she was
not what
talking
bothers
about is his behavior, and the fact is, when he acts that way, it gives other people permission to act
that way.
a certain way, and that's what she's saying. People model their behavior off of their leaders, and if you see a leader bullying people, talking down to people, trashing people, treating women with disrespect, they think it's now okay to do that same kind of behavior, and that's what she was addressing.
I was reading-
not about the rallies or anything
On the
else.
plane,
Dear
I was
God.
reading. I've been reading Double Down for years since 2012, basically.
Yeah, I've read that.
And I was just at the portion of the 2012 campaign where President Obama bombed his first debate, and it talked about during the debate prep about nasty Obama. Like how they wanted to quell nasty Obama.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, which was, if Barack Obama had got up there and said, and we're going to do this, this is how we're going to do it, that's exactly how we would have reacted to the situation that's coming.
What?
All right, but to the point that I think Steven's trying to make is that, Meryl Streep gets up there and it again feels to a big segment of people who honestly probably weren't watching the Golden Globes, but they heard about it and they saw it. And again, it's the idea that, well, we know better than you. We're smarter than you. You need us. I don't know why you didn't listen to us this time, but you're going to listen to us again in 4 years. And if people continue to have that approach, then, we'll be doing the Trump
Turn off
report
your
for 8
stupid
years.
football and your
Well, that was
guerrilla
Meghan McCain's
sports.
response. Was
Right.
that we're gonna you just open it up
But-
to being reelected? But I mean,
And as always, we're spending a lot of time on only a few topics, and I do want to move along. There was a mention of unverifiable things, which goes back to the fun topic that I alluded to at the beginning, which I'm actually less interested in the findings of this report, but someone in the chat room wanted to know when we were going to talk about it. I did talk about it in the beginning. So apparently, major news outlets will report on a document that has no corroboration, not really based in fact, if it's really funny and or interesting / humiliating to someone. So the idea that Donald Trump pays prostitutes for golden showers, we don't give a shit if that, it's like, do you need another source? No, print it. We want to be first. And it's interesting because, again, not that this is where it came from, but the New York Times were like, you know what, we're going to do better. We ignored part of the, but then everybody just runs right into it. It's like, oh my God, we have this. I don't know what that accomplishes. Now, if you waited a couple days and you had a couple other people who maybe actually supported it. It's a better story. But again, everybody wants to better be first than right. And it is interesting just how widely reported that was. You know, it was apparently something being reported on BuzzFeed means that it's fact because of the secondary sources all cited. Well, according to BuzzFeed, according to BuzzFeed, they're going to tell you the 30 hottest Latino actors of the 70s.
Hey, BuzzFeed News has been growing.
Well, they are growing.
They are growing.
Yeah, it's.
I would not cite them.
This is a bad joke. Growing like Pinocchio's nose. It's a terrible joke. But I don't know. I sort of want to ask what everybody thinks. I'll start with Steven because I feel like you get shouted over a lot. When the more of us there are, the harder it can be for people at home to hear you. But it's really, and seriously, it's less about what that document is. Obviously, the salacious nature is why people are excited for it. But are you at all surprised at how widely that story was reported so quickly when there's the word unverifiable is actually in quotes? You know, it's in there. Like, they can't prove it.
I know. No, it's insane. I mean, that is definitely a catchy headline that's going to get shared and retweeted and run wild. But I don't know. I think that people... news sites should be fined for putting out.
For anyone that's wondering, I was obviously very much aware. It was in my mind that I could have made a joke about trickle-down economics.
Which I did.
But there were like so many of them. I know. I saw Scott do it, and then
Trumped up, trickle down.
Yeah,
Trumped up,
trickle
down.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then by the time we got to do the show, I was like, all right, there's like 8 million of them.
There are so many.
So
I think it's fun.
No. Hey, it's fun. It's funny. But sort of once
down.
you peel that back, it's interesting that, again, BuzzFeed says it, so it must be true. Chelsea, again, it's not about the story. I wouldn't want to ask your opinion on that. But do you think we're going to see more of that because of how much we have a media that doesn't, that is... It's safe to say opposed to this incoming administration.
Yeah, and I don't really know what there is to do about it. So on something like that, it's like there's nothing that I can see that's actionable. If there's something to do about it, so I'm not focusing on things like that. I think that there are so many things to be upset over and outraged over and distracted by that I'm kind of trying to keep my eye on the ball because it's easy to keep up with every story and thing that comes out, and if it's funny, I mean, I'm not that amused by this, and so I'm trying to kind of just like let things like that sort of, I was going to say wash over me, but that sounded wrong, and sort of focus on the things that are more pertinent.
It's horrible.
Love gold.
Scott.
It's like Jeff Sessions. We're hoping.
Oh, I know.
Which we're going to get to
I
in a
know.
second.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. But that's part of. I think bringing to your point, that's part of the problem is that there's so many sort of scandals and things that happen on a daily basis with him. That how do you start to overlook real stuff and real things that are happening, or scandals that are legitimately serious. And that's the thing that's a little frightening, is because he is not liked by the media, and they're going to continuously try to throw him down, and that these things are going to happen. I do think there's probably some kind of hint of truth, and I've said that all along, obviously, with Russia, the connection, and the fact that he is so reluctant to acknowledge the tampering with the election. I mean, it's definitely something there, but if it's actually that crazy, I don't know.
The big, simple bullet point of close ties to Russia, that is news, that is interesting. By the way, Lawrence Bakery in the chat room, thanks for being there, Lawrence, and everybody else. BuzzFeed, the amazing news outlet that gave us hard-hitting pieces like the man-spreading epidemic.
How's it any different from fake news, though? That was out all, that's what I'm saying.
No, but that's real news.
No, I know, but I'm saying, like, as far as fake news being a huge thing.
Yes, Drexel.
Somebody posted that on my Facebook wall earlier today, and I said I don't want to read the word unsubstantiated in a headline.
Yeah.
That's not something that anybody wants to read.
No,
it does not belong
not until you
on a
verify
headline.
it.
And
because if it's in the headline, you should not print it.
But this isn't the first time that the media has jumped the gun on a situation in the past few months. I mean, when the FBI went after Anthony Weiner's computer emails, it was Hillary Clinton that was sprawled across the front of the New York Times above the fold for a situation that did not pan out to be next to anything.
Unsubstantiated stories. Look what it did.
But it certainly did not say unsubstantiated in that headline.
But look what it did to Dan Rather. He was so quick and so wanted that story about George W. Bush and the National Guard to be right that they went with it, and it was actually.
And I think that's part of the reason why I said at the beginning.
Yeah.
Why I just stopped watching the news for a month or a couple of months, because I was like, I blame them for probably this entire election.
Oh my goodness!
In the sense of not being able, in the sense of jumping the gun, not being able to cover, not necessarily not just going for Trump enough, but being able to reel the truth back in, no matter whose side it was on.
Yeah, it's all
or giving fair airtime to Bernie.
Well, that's listen. Hillary Clinton didn't get a lot of fair airtime either.
That's true.
So I don't think that it was about necessarily.
Well, she
fair
apparently
airtime.
should have spent more time in Russian hotels.
Apparently. So I think that the media is partly to blame for a lot of the failures, not just of Hillary Clinton, but of Democratic messaging across the country. I think Democrats' communications have to do a little bit better of working with the media, even though it looked like they were working with the media. Obviously, didn't help Democrats out any. So this kind of stuff is, to what Chelsea said, is a real distraction to where the fact that Betsy DeVos's confirmation hearing has been pushed because of the fact that she is going to be a terrible Secretary of Education. So it's
again, because our time is dwindling. Let's talk about, it was just mentioned, confirmation hearings. Jeff Sessions. Does anybody want to go first?
Is anybody like
Jefferson Beauregard?
Jefferson Beauregard.
That
exactly.
has all the. I mean, I'm not trying to be
that's
pigeonholing him, but has all the trappings of like a Confederate soldier.
It does. I know. It doesn't get more than
Jefferson
Beauregard.
Sessions.
It's either that or he's like the Louisiana lawyer in the summer.
He's a character out of a Grisham book.
Yeah, right. And he's
Really
like,
is that name.
what is it?
A Time to Kill. He's the Time to Kill lawyer.
He is no Matthew McConaughey.
Not him. I'm talking about the other side.
Yes,
I'm talking about the other side.
He's basically Atticus Finch.
I woke up watching the confirmation hearing. Actually.
Yes, I watched.
I did it put you right back to sleep.
A lot of protesters.
I saw the part starting with Al Franken, sort of accusing him of hyping up his record. And I wonder if that's going to make a difference to any Republican.
It won't. I think I was actually surprised. Actually, what probably secured Jeff Sessions' vote with a lot of Republicans is probably Susan Collins being the person that introduced him.
Yeah.
Because she is a moderate Republican. She's the
and
one
she
that
gives
said, here's
safe
what
to
I,
vote for him.
It's safe to vote for him because I like him.
Right.
And she said, here's where I worked with him. Here's where he worked on with you, and you Democrats on the board. Here's where we agree. Here's where we disagree. And that's it. And it made him a safe choice for Republicans to be like,
that
well,
is crazy.
Susan.
I know,
it's
awful.
Safe choice.
I'm saying to them.
To them. No, I know what you're saying, but it's awful.
To them.
And if Susan can say it, then that's it.
I mean, we're about to
Senator
find
Collins.
out if anybody in that party has a conscience.
I think if you, like we just talked about Betsy DeVos, I think that is an area where Republicans may or may not feel comfortable with a pick that's so controversial. Jeff Sessions is controversial, but he's a part of their
think that they're
family.
More inclined to pick their battle, and they can't go against their incoming administration on everything, and they got there's a real problem that the party has with one of them, and it could definitely be.
I think the big thing with the Republicans will be, even besides the racism, other issues he had back in the 80s when he was denied that back during Reagan years, was civil forfeiture is another big thing that some Republicans are not comfortable with. But he also kind of brought up, and I thought it was interesting because I saw some things about the other famous Alabama politician George Wallace, and talking about the 80s was a long time ago, which coincidentally enough during that time period that's when George Wallace was governor again there, and he kind of disavowed racism and everything. And so some people are saying, well, couldn't he have changed since then from his thoughts, and even if whatever his things were in the past, and he's really not anymore, even if you thought he was. And I'm like, but that still doesn't mean that he really has grown as a person and
but
he's
he's
changed.
What did he say about
Because
some of
he
the social
still kept
issues
some of that
today?
stuff behind.
What did he say about gay rights?
He did say
LGBT?
Jeff Sessions.
He
They
said he wanted
prepped
to-
him. They
he's
prepped
been-
him
Yes.
for the most moderate sounding.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Social, like it was just like,
But it
I
sounded
believe
like
in
he-
LGBT.
Yes, and
no, you don't.
no.
At what point?
It
in
sounded
your
like
actually
he
go to
wanted
the
to leave a
Supreme Court.
lot of the law that's already settled, right?
No.
No, he gave the speaking points.
Here's the way the Republicans like to spin constitutional law. They like to say what's on the books is on the books, and we have to enforce that no matter what happens. And I do think, and to the point, there was a part in his testimony where he said, "Oh, sometimes there's gray area too," and I was like, "Who says that in a confirmation hearing?" And so, I think Republicans like to pretend Republicans like to use the Constitution as a way to restrict rights, and
Yes.
that is
The
what
Voting Rights Act is the most
that is what
frightening
for
example.
Jeff Sessions to get up there and say, oh well, once a law is passed, that's how we're going to enforce it, instead of saying once a law is fair and then passed, then we're going to enforce it the way that where it benefits all Americans, instead of saying, well, this immigration law is passed and now we're going to enforce it and that's how we're going to do, or this LGBT law is.
I mean, he said he wasn't going to support a Muslim registry.
Right.
But I don't.
He also
I
said-
don't know if I believe
He
that.
also,
my problem,
he
too.
also
It's just too
said,
much of the
to
In
your
fact,
point
I'm
on
pretty
racial
sure I
disparity,
don't.
he said,
Right.
oh, well, the words are, I abhor the Klan. Well, that sounded a heck of a lot convincing. That did not sound convincing at
What
all.
else
So,
do
And the
you
pot
want,
smoking.
though, if he's not going to enforce the immigration bill, if he's going to leave
Well,
gay rights law as settled, I mean,
that's
what
not.
else
I don't.
are you looking
Here's
for?
the thing.
don't
we're saying
believe
we
that.
don't
But
believe
here's the
that.
thing. What he
Because
said.
if it's
What he said
passed.
was not that he would leave the law settled.
Right.
It was if a law passes, I will enforce that law. And so if you look at what states are doing across the country, if you look at what's happening in Missouri right now, there's so much happening in Republican legislatures are doing in states that it's going to trickle around to the other 39 Republican-controlled states, and it's going to have an impact on the national conversation. So Jeff Sessions is going to be like, oh, well, that law is passed. That's the law of the land, and that's how it's going to work.
Lawrence Bakery
Yeah, he brought up a
raises
good
a
point.
good
Yeah, I was
point
gonna
where he
say.
says, I find it interesting that he wants to leave the LGBT laws to the states, but when it comes to marijuana, he plans to enforce federal law to the full degree. Not good news. This is another
Right.
reason why I don't
and,
like this
and
guy.
that's,
Yeah,
and
I
that goes
don't
back
either.
to the Republicans kind of picking and choosing
Yeah, exactly.
the
Right.
laws
To-
that they
that they
feel
will-
like
But
are
to
enforceable.
Stephen's point, I mean, you have these confirmation hearings, and all you can do is take the man at his
Yeah.
word, and you're inclined to not believe him.
No, you don't
Let's
have
see-
to. You can listen to the words
You
and
can
say,
s-
I smell.
And
Or
that's what
to see
Al
his
Franken
past has
did.
been. You know,
Right,
his
well,
past-
Al
Franken's
Franken
there.
did that
As a
on
predictor
Jeff
of
Sessions
future
today,
behavior.
and our new senator here in California, Kamala Harris, did that on the National Security Advisor pick today, where she drilled him on immigration. So I do think that Democrats are, at least the new ones, are going to come out strong. I mean, obviously today we had Cory Booker testify against Jeff Sessions,
Yes.
which never happens.
No, and that was
and
great.
so I think more of these young Democrats are going to start to
And
get fired up just a little
Sessions
bit.
wants to keep Gitmo opened and operating.
And are you saying that in a way that
I
you
mean,
I don't know.
have a
from what
problem
I've
with
seen,
that?
no,
or?
yeah, I do. From what
Okay.
I've seen, and I know Obama wanted to get that closed for his whole 8
And
years.
But
he's
I
worked for a
wonder
long time.
why it didn't happen.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, what I've seen on
Obstructionist
Gitmo,
Yeah.
what I've
party.
seen on
Interesting.
Gitmo is
Maybe-
really sad
Well,
and sickening, and what they do to those people down there.
And that's
what they do to
another,
those
again,
persons
a
down there.
moral issue.
It's
that
a
has-
constitutional
It's
issue.
a
You don't
constitutional.
even have to
I'm
get
sorry, it's a
moral.
I mean, if we look at it and we go, those aren't American citizens. So a lot of those folks aren't American citizens. They don't have constitutional rights. That's what somebody
Yeah.
would
But
argue.
that's
I think that's what somebody would
constitutional
argue.
rights are how we operate.
I'm saying somebody will say they do not have constitutional rights.
I'm
and
still of the firm belief that Gitmo's open for the same reason it was open. That obviously, you can see all those tactics and go like, "Wow, that's terrible." Oh, did they get any good information? And
Yeah.
some people will say you don't. Other people say you do. And I think if you do, they're probably not going to tell us. And the fact that it's still open tells me that maybe that's why.
Hey, here's
Now, I don't know
here's
for sure.
the problem with Republicans that I have. Republicans.
You're the only one.
Yeah. No, there's plenty. But I mean, on particularly this issue, they have a problem with bringing and monitoring terror suspects in their home states, in their jail systems, but have no problem jailing American citizens and keeping them in their prisons. So it's like, who do you want to monitor? Like, who would you rather have in your? What do you think they're going to
Prisons.
escape?
Well, that's
Yeah.
the problem.
El Chapo's not gonna,
Yeah.
you know what
That's
I
the
mean?
thing.
Like,
You're
it's just
right.
not. It's just
They
they
don't want anyone to
focus.
go anywhere.
They focus on the wrong people,
Right.
and it turns out that they're focused more on restricting and keeping at bay the American people than they are the terrorists that they claim they want to keep out, because they don't want to let them go around the world. They don't want them to go to their states. Yet they don't seem to have a problem with. They love the Constitution, yet they don't want to follow the Constitution in the way that it's supposed to be, and yet they have this moral, and they want to blame Democrats for having a moral problem in the
Right.
country.
Well, I do want to move on to one final issue, one specifically for Stephen, because this was a major issue for you during the course of the campaign. I believe this happened earlier today. Trump advisors met with Paul Ryan to discuss tax reform, and to me, that seems like they have their eye on a very specific ball, and they know that that is something that's very important to a lot of the people who voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Is some kind of tax reform. So you
It was
hear
important
that?
to you, right, as a Trump voter?
It's a little important to me.
He was a nobody voter, if you recall. He voted for no one.
Yeah,
you should have written in your
I'm not sure I
Yeah.
believe that.
I'm not Jeff Sessions over here.
But obviously we don't know the specifics of that meeting, but the fact that that issue is being met on essentially right away, does that tell you that they realize how important that is to so many Americans?
For instance, I have a friend today who got a big settlement check for the sum of $400,000, and out of that check he got about 180. So 100 and
A settlement check?
yeah, and he's a lawyer, actually.
Oh, so it was income.
Yeah, so $222,000.
That's very weird. You don't pay taxes immediately on you. It's on your whole income. So it's very bizarre
That's
that
the
somebody's
tax that was taken out of his check.
Do you think if he got that check,
it was like
do you think if he got that
$200,000
check
out
a
of
month
check.
from now, he'd get to keep more of it?
Something sounds bizarre about that.
Probably.
It is weird.
But at the
to
same
that
time,
point,
I'm gonna call-
it's less about
here's the
that
deal.
specific check than...
Here's the deal. I mean, we also live in a state where we have state tax, and we also pay a 9% sales tax, which is a lot higher than a lot of other states. So tax reform is very important for me.
Well, he's not going to fix the California state tax.
I know, but I'm saying overall taxes. we pay a lot of taxes living here, so that's why it's so important to me. But
We have a lot of advantages that a lot of other states. We have a lot of advantages that a lot of other states don't have. Either.
Which tax
For
plan?
instance, so like he says, if you make under $112,000 as a single filer, you pay 25% under tax plan. Is that so? Say you make $120,000. The first 112 is taxed at 25%, and then the 8,000 from 112 to 120 is taxed at the 30%. Is that how that works? Or is the full enchilada taxed at 30% since you make 120?
Well, I don't know. He may undo the whole tax system as we know
But
it.
is
But
anyone
currently it's
clear on
progressive.
that?
Look,
Currently, the way it goes is the first, 0 to 112, if that's the cutoff, is taxed at that rate, and then
Right,
after that,
exactly. It's taxed
yeah,
at
The only
higher
thing we
rate.
know,
That's
the
what he
only
would
thing
keep.
we know for
Right.
sure is that Trump doesn't like enchiladas. But to your point about
that
Taco-
sounds
it's
good. I'm gonna
taco
get some for
balls.
dinner.
that does actually sound
Enchiladas
Yeah.
last night. It was good.
So,
Arizona.
does anyone else feel like this is the right thing to focus on? Whether obviously this is not the
But we didn't
administration.
Well, they're focused on
Avoiding
Obamacare,
tax
that's
reform
their
is coming.
thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
It
if you're a
should-
conservative, that's what you campaign on, and that's certainly
Yeah,
what he
but-
did, and that's what a lot of
And you
people
need to
voted for.
deliver
But it's
on
also
it.
here's
So we know it's
here's
coming.
a majority of the Trump voters, the income tax that is being paid out by a lot of the wealthy people is going to help those people who voted for Donald Trump in states that need the help.
This is
If
true.
you look at what happened in Kentucky, Mitch McConnell spent the entire 2014 campaign not really campaigning against Obamacare because he knew how successful Kentucky
Right,
Connect
Connect is
was
hugely
and
successful.
and so
Yes.
you look at what Trump voters are saying about the Affordable Care Act. Some are like, oh my gosh, I didn't know it was happening.
they're
I
like,
hope they
that's
don't
different
repeal
than
it.
Obamacare.
You're like, who do you think? How do you think that stuff gets paid for? You know, and so I
Yeah.
think that again, at some point, people have to decide what's more important to them. And I think it is, do I keep my own money? And that's the difference between liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans on that issue, which is, do I help the common good, or do I focus on myself?
I mean, I think there's such thing as a balance.
Right, I agree.
And
There is a balance.
And we don't
yeah.
have to give it all away.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have,
But you do have
we
to wanna
should be
help.
really smart about the money that we do
Yeah.
give away,
Right,
and
and what it's being
subsidies
used
to
for.
Well-
corporations that don't need it, and
Donald Trump, who doesn't pay taxes in 18 years.
yeah. So I mean, the problem should be to clean up what we do with the money that
Mm-hmm.
we have. Then we're going to need less, and maybe some more can go back
Right.
to
I also think
taxpayers.
that corporations also have to relook at their moral compass.
Yeah, it used to be a thing where corporations took everybody into account. And I used to think, coming out of law school, that corporations only cared about the bottom line because that's what they were mandated by law to care about. But that's actually not true. It's just become a culture of only caring about shareholders, not about stakeholders. And so it's a cultural shift that needs to occur. And it needs to occur with all of us not thinking it's so cool for greedy bastards to, be flaunting all their wealth and for us to look up to them. I think that's the first thing that we can all do is
And-
just like, if you, ladies, if you talk to a guy and he thinks he's badass shit because he makes a ton of money and he doesn't do it in with integrity, have any meaning, passion, fulfillment, all he does is move money around. ignore him. Don't date
on
him.
that,
Don't
we
sleep
only
with
have-
him because I think
only
this
have
is how
about-
women can change what's important to men.
Well, no, I was gonna say, and also like these corporations saying that they don't have money to pay for healthcare and everything. When CEOs make 200 times what their lowest paid employees
like-
make, there's something wrong with that.
Well, and because
something
what
wrong
about
with
that.
like
Real quick,
some of the
Steven.
big companies that are not going to Mexico anymore to move their plants to Mexico to cut down their labor costs
What
and make
about-
more money? Trump's stopping that and putting it back.
That's
Oh
a
my
funny
God,
story
that's-
you tell yourself.
Yeah, nice little spin there.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
we
not
can talk,
true.
we
Yeah,
can
that's
talk
a nice
about that
spin.
in the weeks ahead.
Yeah,
Don't fall for
the
that.
prices might fall on us if we continue to buy those products if those
Right.
prices go up. But can't
That's
big
spinning.
corporations like that afford to take a little bit less in their profits to stay here
Again,
in the States?
a moral.
Yeah,
Right.
and to
The
take
CEOs have to
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to give,
CEOs and the
I want to
execs.
give Drexel a second
it's a
here
good
for a little plug because your show is rolling back out. Is
Yeah,
it, is it
Political
not?
Culture
It'll
comes
be back
back
next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, Michael Hausum is my first guest on the panel. So
He'll be here on the
he
panel.
will be here
Nice.
doing Political Culture next week. I reached out to him and I said, I disagree with you, but you got a lot to say, and I think that we want a different panel. I don't want a bunch of people who I agree with sitting next to me all the time. So Political Culture will be back. It's actually going to be streamed on both AfterBuzz sometimes and Black Hollywood Live. We're really trying to test
It's
that.
a new format,
It's a
right?
new format.
Yeah, that's
It'll
great.
be more Meet the Press style.
New
I'll
year, new
moderate.
show, new Drexel.
New show. Yeah, so check it out next week, 6 o'clock. Michael Hausum will be our first guest, and then AfterBuzz. So we're going to be pairing a lot of our every week
That's
will
great.
be some of our favorite AfterBuzzers.
And that
from
show's
different
right
shows.
before this one, so
Yep.
I don't
No
know.
excuse
Just
not
told
to
Michael
watch
Hausum
both.
was that,
I'm
yeah.
starting to have a hunch that Michael Hausum might be on the show. Anyway, we do have to go. We went a little long. Special thanks to Drexel Hurd for joining us at Drexel Hurd. Stephen Helmkamp at Stephen Helmkamp. Chelsea Galicia at Chelsea Galicia. Scott Moore at SMan80. I'm Christian Bladt at Christian DMZ. Don't forget the show's Twitter at Trump Report ABTV. Follow us there. Like us on YouTube. Comment, rate us on iTunes. And we will see you next Tuesday at 7 p.m. for more Trump Report. See you guys then.
Woo! Bye.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.